Hello, this video is going to show you how to identify some land features on Google Earth just by looking at them. Now I have this Google Earth set on the clean mode. You can always change that by clicking the little 3 bars over here. There's another video that shows exactly how to do that. But to use Google Earth to look at the land features, a couple of the basic things. This is a far zoomed out Google Earth. You can see the United States here. Now obviously the blue is going to be the water. So this would be the Pacific Ocean, this is the Atlantic Ocean, this is the Gulf of Mexico, and so on. So you pretty much know that. Blue is going to be water. Now, if I'm looking at the color of blue, the lighter blue is fairly shallow water, the darker blue is deeper water, and the really dark blue is the deepest parts of the ocean. So now there's a few parts here which has shading, and that would just basically mean these are like little mountains. But generally, the darker the blue, the deeper the water. So that's an important thing to know. And that works for the oceans. So the oceans have a lot of features in them. And if you want to look at the depth of the ocean, you look at the color of the blue. Otherwise, you just look at the bumps that you can see along the ocean. Now, any place where we see white or lighter color, that would mean that this part of the ocean is less deep. And this place right here, where the color turns from white to an actual color, this would actually be land. Now, this land in particular is Hawaii, the state of Hawaii and all the islands, but this is a pretty good indication of how things work for the rest of the features on Google Earth. The green areas are going to be where you're going to find vegetation. It's usually going to be trees, sometimes it's going to be grass, but wherever you see green, that's where you're going to find vegetation. The browner and tanner areas are places where there's not any vegetation. Sometimes that might be because there's mountains. Sometimes that might just be because there's desert, or maybe even grassland, maybe a brown grassland. So green equals vegetation, brown and light brown means that there's no vegetation. Now, if you look at the shading of Google Earth, it's fairly easy to see where the mountains are. There's a mountain here, there's a big mountain here, there's a mountain on this island. This island's got a mountain, there's a mountain here. You can kind of tell just by the shading. So, and that's just in the state of Hawaii. Now, if you look under the water where the blue is, again, by the shading, you can see where the mountains go down, because Hawaii is basically the top of a giant mountain that's in the ocean. And remember, the darker the blue, the deeper the ocean. So this part of the Hawaiian Islands under the water is not very deep, but when you go down over here, the ocean gets very, very deep. Now I'm going to zoom out here, and let's look at another part of the ocean. You'll notice that several parts of the ocean have these kind of arced, really, really dark areas. There's an arc going this way. If I back out even more, like this, there's an arc of dark, like right here. Down in South America, there's another dark area. Remember, the darker the blue, the deeper the oceans. Any place you see a very dark and usually kind of an arced area, that's because there's a trench there. A trench is a super, super, super deep part of the ocean that basically goes way deeper than the ocean floor around that. So this right here, for example, would be a trench. This is right on the edge of the Scotia Plate, and it's just off the coast of South America. In many places where you see a trench like this, you're also going to see shallow water right next to the super deep trench, and you're also going to see some islands. These are the South Sandwich Islands, and these islands usually form an arc like that that's almost in the same shape as the trench. It's called an island arc. You'll find examples of that there, and even way up here in the state of Alaska. These are all islands, and they form the shape of an arc. Now, when I'm looking at just land, like the United States, as I zoom in, I get a much clearer picture. Now remember, again, the green areas is either going to be trees, dark green is usually trees, and light green is sometimes trees, sometimes it's grass. This is the eastern part of the United States. It is very green over there. There's lots of trees. As we go west, these are the grasslands of Kansas and Colorado and Oklahoma and northern Texas. And then we have this area where there's some dark green, some other colors, and this would be where there's mountains. These mountains actually have forests in them, but then valleys between them that often don't have forests, and the tops of the mountains are so high that there's no forest there. If I zoom in, I can get really close. These are the highest mountains in Utah, the Uinta Range, And this whole area here is too high for trees, so there's no trees. This area here has trees, and you can see the dark areas between the mountains. These are canyons that would be filled with trees. Now, because Google Earth is actually a bunch of images taken from satellites, we can even sometimes see some snow. So these mountains also have snow. I zoom in a lot, and I can see the snow on all these mountains, and I can zoom all the way in, even to where I can see the individual trees, and then I see these little dark areas. These would be lakes. Now, unlike the oceans, where the blue means how deep it is, lakes are usually just the color that they were pictured. So these tend to be darker than these just because on the day the picture was taken, the sun was at whatever angle it was. I'm going to zoom back out and we'll look around again. Moving over here to Nevada and Utah, I see some lighter areas. Now, the darker brown areas, this is where there's a lot of mountains and maybe even some brush, like some bushes. When I see very, very light areas, usually that's just sand. And in fact, this is a dry lake bed here. It's just basically sand with nothing in it. And here's a mountain with trees, a mountain with trees, a mountain maybe that's too high to have trees. And I can move all the way over here. And I notice this neat feature here. This is completely white. This would be snow. And this is the volcano that is Mount Shasta here in Northern California. Now, one last place to take a look at, and then I think you'll be able to see how to use Google Earth really well. I'm going to go all the way over here to India. And northern India, if I look here, I can see there's probably a lot of trees right here, trees here. This might be grass. This looks like desert because it's nice and brown. And then I've got this area here that's got a lot of white and a lot of dark and whatnot. I can zoom in and see, lo and behold, yes, indeed, there's a lot of white. And this, of course, would be snow. These are the highest mountains in the world. These are the Himalayas. And this is a mountain range. A mountain range is one area, could be very, very long, that is just continuous mountains. And these mountains start from way over here in northern Burma, and they go all the way across the country of Bhutan and Nepal and India and even into Pakistan. These are the highest mountains on Earth. These are the Himalaya mountains. Now, from this view, I also can see these lines. These lines like this one right here and this one right here. These would be rivers. Rivers that come down from the mountains. They bring all the water down and eventually empty it out into the ocean. So these lines like this, these are always rivers. So it's another thing that's very important to know. You can go over here. There's another river that goes along here. And then even in North Africa, this right here, this line would be the Nile River that goes to the desert. Now notice over here in North Africa, just yellow, basically yellow and white. That means there's probably very, very little, if any, vegetation. When I look over here, this is very brown. This is probably just rocks. I can zoom in, and if it got more clear, you'd see this is just rocks. Now, the last thing we're going to look at is where you can identify where plate boundaries are, because we are studying about plates. When I look in the center of the ocean, very often you can see fairly easily cracks that run along the ocean floor. Not these ridges like this that go this way, but these straight line cracks, because the way the ocean floor cracks open is in a straight line. And this one here cracks all the way like this. And this is literally where the border is, the boundary between the South American plate over here and the African plate over here. And sometimes these cracks are really, really easy to follow. Sometimes you get a mix-up of a lot of cracks. And sometimes the cracks are basically just right along a ridge, just like this. And this would be where one plate boundary ends. You can see the crack right here. This would be the North American plate and the Eurasian plate. And you can see where these plate boundaries end and where the other plate begins. So hopefully this tutorial will help you identify and understand how to use Google Earth to see what features are on planet Earth. Good luck.